And picking up on your point, Dr. Sobhani, you said that the bigger issue, of course, was the failure of foreign policy to then deal with a broken immigration policy. But, of course, that's not what the Supreme Council were looking specifically at what Arizona had done. Picking up on Geeta's point about the impact on the people of the ground, what's your concern about what this is going to mean, despite all these assurances that there won't be racial profiling? This is the United States of America. This issue is a scapegoat hot button issue that is deeply politically partisan and divided. And, you have police officers saying that this is just bad law and bad policy for them on the ground, and far too many police departments that indicate again and again and again that there is a long history of doing exactly that, racial profiling. So then ultimately, how are the people protected?
Well, I would first start by saying that neither side has offered any constructive solution to those who are in our country illegally. No one has really thought about how to address the needs and wants of illegal immigrants, maybe some of whom want to go back to their home country but don't have the means to be able to go back. But there's another group that I think we're also missing here, which is America's black community, African American community. In my book, Press 2 for English, I have a chapter on the impact of immigration on America's African American community. And it is, unfortunately, the statistics paint a very devastating picture, because to the extent that we have more people enter into the job market, it basically increases the pool of labor and allows companies to essentially exploit immigrants at the expense of the black community. So, unfortunately, when I started off my comments, I was talking about justice. This is not justice for either side, whether one looks at it from the perspective of racial profiling or whether one looks at it from the perspective of the impact on America's black communities. It is not being just for either side. And unfortunately, neither Republicans nor Democrats have offered solutions. For example, let me just point one picture. The country of El Salvador, approximately 500 Salvadorans live in the Los Angeles area, 240,000 live in my area, the Washington, D.C. area. Last year, the foreign investment in El Salvador was only $78 million. That's it, the amount of money that went in. Now, we import $8 billion worth of toys from China, from communist China. I think we could absolutely redirect that trade, maybe set up manufacturing plants in El Salvador so that instead of $78 million that goes into El Salvador, now we have an $8 billion magnet for exports from El Salvador to the United States, just toys. And so no one's really thinking about these issues from an economic perspective, because at the end of the day, immigration is not a social issue. It is an economic issue, and it's an economic minus for immigrants who have to leave their country because there is unjust rulers in their country, and it is impacting America's low-income families, especially black communities. So, in my opinion, it's not serving anyone.
I would really like to respond to part of what the professor said, if you don't mind.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead, Geeta.
I think the underlying question that you're bringing up when you're talking about the impact on black communities is this sort of implicit idea that somehow the Latino community is sort of at odds with the black community on these issues. First of all, it's not really a fair binary. An enormous number of immigrants are black, are either Latino and black, or coming from the Caribbean, or increasingly West Africa. I mean, it's just simply a fallacy to sort of equate immigration with Latinos. An enormous population especially in Arizona, but in many parts of the country, including New York. Of course, there's a very strong, long-time Latino citizen population, and there's at the same time a very, very significant population of black immigrants. So to sort of divide it in that way really doesn't make sense in terms of the demographics we currently have. And I think to say that, that immigration has this terrible impact on if what you mean is the native-born black community, I mean, there are just as many studies showing that actually immigration assists the economy. Numerous towns that have really experienced terrible recessions after they've implemented their sort of municipal-level Arizona-style legislation where Latinos have fled and other immigrants have fled, and they've had to, there's one town in New Jersey that actually had to repeal its anti-immigrant ordinance because the economy just fell into such a terrible recession there, Riverside, New Jersey. So I don't think that's really a fair way to categorize, and that's certainly not the way immigrant activists categorize it. And I would just really caution against setting those two groups as in opposition to each other. It's really not borne out by the facts.
Well, I don't believe they're in opposition, but I believe that, and you're right, in the New York area, there's a large, for example, Puerto Rican population. But my point is very different, which is Sonia Sotomayor is the first woman Latina on the Supreme Court. There are thousands of Sonia Sotomayors in Puerto Rico. Our job as a nation should be to promote those in Puerto Rico to blossom. There are hundreds and thousands of successful Haitians in our country, and yet Haiti itself is devastated. My point is we need to export our values that make us such a great, successful country for immigrants back to those countries. If you picked up the map of Russia and plopped it over Mexico, you would have 32% of Russian population coming across the border because they, according to opinion polls, they don't want to live in their country because it's so corrupt, there is no rule of law. But who would we help if we allowed every Russian to leave their country and come into the United States? We need to have a rich Mexico on our border because Mexico has the potential to be a very rich country. It has oil, it has gas, it has agriculture, and so to the extent that we continue to view the issue of immigration solely through the prism of a civil rights issue, I think we are missing the economic issue, which is bringing growth to our southern neighbors, to our southern hemisphere, and promoting good governance through our foreign policy in places like India, in places like Russia. So
we're going to have to close it there. Closing thought to you, Geeta. I mean, just listening to you, the two of you, reminds us of the fact that immigration always becomes this hot button discursive issue that is a mix of politics and economics and civil rights and social justice. But in the end, it's the people on the ground who are going to feel the sharp end of what happened in yesterday's Supreme Court ruling. Closing thought to you, briefly.
Well, I mean, I think in terms of looking at this from a broad economic perspective, we really can't overlook that this is, at bottom, what we're dealing with here is a complete failure to have comprehensive national immigration reform that will not only help immigrants themselves, but will significantly reduce this problem we have of unauthorized immigrants being exploited on the job. Once they are on a legal pathway, they'll have much more empowerment to sort of have the same equal rights that all of us have on the job. And I don't think that the civil rights issues can really be separated from the economic issues. It's really all part of the same economic social justice that many immigrant activists are fighting for.
Geeta Schwartz and Dr. Rob Sobhani, thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.